Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Right on time. 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Where I'm at. Where you guys are at. I don't know. All right. Welcome, everybody. Okay, what do we got? Let's do some roll call. No, let's do announcements. What's going on with this? Should show the days. Something happened with this? Huh. What happened? Let me check my phone. Because on the computer... Let me see. It is not showing the... It might be in my edit mode, so you guys might be able to see it. Let's see if I can pull it up another way. How do I get to this? Let's see. Preview changes. Let's see if this works. Huh. I'm in on the Patristic Faith website on the back end, and I don't want... I just want to I want to be able to show you guys from your end, but there's something going on with, because it's not showing my countdown. Let's see if it has on my phone. Yeah, it shows it on my phone. 36 days. 35 days, because in 33 minutes it's going to go down to 35 days. Right now it's at 36 days, 33 minutes and 2 seconds, 1 second. Okay, let's see if I can do it from here. I'm trying to get it fixed. Hold on. Yeah, it's not showing from... It's weird. I wonder if there's a way to sign out. And then I'm going to log out. Okay? Let's see if it works. From this way... Odd. Try one more time. Yeah, it's not going to work. All right, here's what we got. From your end, you'll be able to see it, but when I do the capture, you see here it's not, from my view, it's not showing the countdown, but it has 36 days. 35 really, because in 31 minutes. We have a couple different changes, because guess what? We have a new sponsor. I'd like to announce St. Paisius Brotherhood. Click on here, it goes to the Brotherhood, and I will announce later today they're sending up a instructor, in which we will have our own Therapia workshop, as you see here. The Therapia workshop instructors, Father Russell, who is the parish priest and rector of Holy Trinity, Archpriest Father Andrew Moore, myself, Sarah Berry, Gil, and Charlene, and then St. Paisios Brotherhood will have their own Therapia workshop. Because we have additional ones here, so the schedule is going to change a little bit. So what it looks like is Friday, the Therapia workshops will be the all of us clergy. And those will be, that's an hour and 45 minutes right there. There'll be, each priest will do 2 sessions of 50 minutes. Now, what that allows you to do is go to at least 2 of the clergy Therapia workshops. Then the laity, Sarah, Gil, Charlene, and the St. Paisios Brotherhood instructor, special guest, who I'll announce later today, will go in and do Therapia workshops. Oh, you know what? I got it backwards. The laity, the counselors, will go in Friday. 2 sessions right there, so you can choose to go to 2 of those. Then Saturday is when the clergy. Now what we're going to do, change here, is the clergy will do a workshop an hour here. And then I think we've decided, instead of the outdoor activity, usually we go and play volleyball, we're going to do another workshop. That's going to allow you to go to at least 2 of the clergy Therapia workshops. We think that's a lot better. So we're happy to announce that. Make sure you get your tickets. They're going to sell out. If you know somebody who'd like to sponsor, either you individually, you own a company, or know somebody that's an individual or owns a company that would like to, here's the sponsorship packages. So hurry up. We have 35 days. Don't forget that we have the live bluegrass band. We played some of that yesterday. Also, we're keeping open this week our Patristic Faith College Epistemology Online Canvas course. And so you can make payments. We do have a charitable contribution, and the first person to contact me will actually get a scholarship discounted on that. We have 1 available. So if you'd like to join this week, again, we just started Monday, so there's enough time for you. We'll keep the registration open. If you want to avail of that discount off of the original discount, $750, because of that charitable contribution to offer that was given for a scholarship for one financial need, please do. Don't forget too that because this is a college course, many colleges, chairs and deans are allowing this to be transferred credits to another college. So go ahead and reach out if you're interested in that. I'm trying to think what other announcements. It'll probably come to me. Those are the most important ones there. If you'd like to come early to Montana, we will be blessed with His Grace Bishop Maxim for a patronal feast day on the 8th of June. And then our mission parish Divine Liturgy for Holy Spirit Monday on June 9th. And possibly another liturgy on the 10th or 11th at one of our parishioners'
chapels that we built and was blessed. Monastery tour Thursday, the 12th, officially kicking off the conference with the banquet dinner Thursday evening, the 12th, and then service, morning prayers Friday morning, and then straight into the conference speakers and workshops. All right. I want to give a shout out to Dave the Philippian, who donates $10, a regular contributor. Thank you, Dave, so much. There are some people who are coming early to participate because our grace will be with us. His grace, our Bishop Maxim, will be with us that entire week before, too. So, it's 35 days. It's not long. So, again, don't wait and find yourself shut out because the ticket's sold out. And we're expecting to sell out. God bless all of you who... Michelle, who has to leave. All right, let's go into questions. Yeah, don't forget, as Justin points out, Henley, we have an amazing partnership deal with Best Western Butte Plaza Inn. Right now, it's $80 off. As you get closer to the date in the summer, the hotel prices go up everywhere. It's not just Butte. So I'd say the discount, well, you get $115 a night off of, like, I think they're at $185 or $175 or something like that. They're just going to go up. It's a great deal. We also have the ranch, David's Ranch, for free camping that if you want to go budget. And then, people sometimes choose to split Airbnb and stuff like that. You do get a link to the Telegram, the Orthodox MontaNIKA 2025 Telegram, in which you can organize carpools, get rides from airports and stuff, and meetups and things like that. So we're really excited about that. Last night was when all the students' papers, finals, and missing work was due. So I'll be spending the next couple days just kind of grading the rest of that, and then throwing everything into preparing for the MontaNIKA. Just over a month away, so I'm trying to get as much schoolwork done at the two colleges as possible, so then I just throw all my energy into that. So, anyways, keep an eye out on the Patristic Faith MontaNIKA website there to see, because I'm going to actually upload the bio of the St. Paisios Brotherhood instructor who will be coming. What else? What shall I say? I'm also going to go back into the YouTube and those say discussion and Q&A that we've had. I'm going to go back and kind of like what Jay does when we open up X space, and then he'll go back in and name, because it's opened, right? Where there's different, you never know what topic. I'm kind of like that with the Patristic Faith discussion Q&A. After we get on a topic, I can go back in. For example, what were the last two or three were covering the analysis of um, the psychologists from University of British Columbia in their paper, and the American Psychological Association, signaling virtuous victim as indicators of dark triad personalities. And I think I'll rename and relabel those past streams so that people can find that. Lean into Jim Bob. We need Jim Bob up here to bring his guitar. What else? Yes, it's the Best Western Butte Plaza Inn. You can either book it through the link that's sent to you, or you can call them directly and use the name Serbian Church Retreat, and they will give you the discount. Here's an interesting thing. So, obviously I'm biased. But what if I told you my biases are true? I am biased, but my bias is good, and it's true. There was an individual that was saying, now I only want certain types of people moving into Montana, namely Orthodox. But yeah, I ain't gonna lie. Well, you know, if Orthodox are moving, of course I want them to move up here so we can build the kingdom together. I love working with you guys to build the kingdom, you know, building the monastery, building our parishes, you know, building the conference. I really do love working with you. That's where my heart is. I'm not a philosopher, professor of philosophy. That's something I do on the side. I am a child of God. I am in the priesthood as a deacon. That's my identity, and my job is to build the kingdom and to serve. And first and foremost, the other stuff I just do on the side, my side hustle, teaching philosophy. And so, of course, you know, I'm more than happy to receive people who want to move up here and help me and the rest of the fathers build the kingdom and the new empire in Montana. So, I'm trying to find this. Some individual, one of my Twitter followers, said they wanted to buy property in Idaho. And I'm like, Montana's better. Not gonna lie, I'm biased. But let's look at reasons why and let you judge. Now, there's some people that love the South, sweaty, hot, dirty, and big cities and stuff like that. I can't help you. If you like that hot, humid, sticky, dirty, I do love Southerners though, but there's things about the South that I don't like and I couldn't live. Some people need that kind of weather, and the environment's really different too. There is the kind of, what I do appreciate similarities is the kind of agrarians and rural elements that you can find in the South that are similar to Montana. But let's look at what are the differences. I found Grok is useful for giving us a list. So let's look. What does Grok say? Yeah, where do we sign? Where did I put the... Let's see what Grok says. What are the advantages of living in Montana over Idaho? Montana and Idaho share similarities, like stunning natural beauty, outdoor recreation. This is all true. I don't hate on Idaho. I have 2 godchildren there and many friends that I grew up with. But each has distinct advantages. Has a low population density. Here's a concise breakdown of why Montana might be preferable based on available data and insights. Larger land area, more space. Montana is the 4th largest state by area. 147,000 square miles, compared to Idaho's only 83,000 square miles. And I think the breakdown goes Alaska's number 1, Texas, California, and then Montana, the largest states. This translates into more open land, fewer crowds, and a greater sense of solitude, especially in rural areas. Montana's population density is roughly 7.4 people per square mile, and Idaho's 23.5. So Montana offers a more spread out lifestyle. Yeah. Tax advantages. Montana has no sales tax, which can reduce overall living costs compared to Idaho's 6% sales tax. While both states have similar income tax structures, Montana's lack of sales tax benefits retirees and those with fixed income. Property tax in Montana average effective rate 0.83% are slightly lower than Idaho's 0.87%, though this varies by county. Superior National Parks. Montana is home to Glacier National Park and part of Yellowstone National Park, both globally renowned for biodiversity scenery. Idaho, while scenic, lacks comparable federally protected landmarks. Glacier alone draws millions of its pristine lakes, trails, and wildlife, enhancing Montana's appeal for nature lovers. Also, we have the Bob Marshall Wilderness, which is one of the largest wildernesses and protected lands in the United States. Stronger... Oh, what happened? Stronger ranching and agricultural heritage. Montana's economy and culture are deeply tied to ranching, absolutely, with vast cattle ranches and cowboy ethos that's more pronounced than in Idaho. If you value wide open plains and traditional Western lifestyle, yee-haw! Somebody poisoned the water hole. Montana's big sky country delivers. Its agricultural output, especially in wheat and beef, outpaces Idaho's non-potato sectors. Lower population growth pressure. Idaho, particularly in the Boise area, has seen rapid population growth, 2.2% annually in recent years, driving up housing costs and straining infrastructure. Montana's growth is slower, approximately 1%, preserving its small town feel and keeping home prices more stable. So it is true that real estate's roughly the same, but as Grok is pointing out, it's more stable. Those prices aren't going to fluctuate as much. Medium home price in Montana. And it is for one of the things that the individual brought up is there are still places in the United States that are cheaper than Montana. It used to be a lot better. We had the influx in 2020, and that stopped after a year or two. But it did bring up house prices. For example, my parents got a cabin in Lincoln, Montana for roughly about $240K. It's probably double that now. That's unfortunate. My godson got a property about $460K on Flathead. It's probably up to $800K now. But there's still places that you can find where property is really good. It's just, how flexible where you want to live. Obviously, avoid Bozeman, and Kalispell is one of the largest growing areas as well. I love Kalispell, but anyways, you see here that the medium home price is slightly less than Idaho. Unique cultural identity. Of course, we have the Indians. I don't like to call them the natives because that was appropriate. It used to be the those descending stock from England and the UK were called natives because we were British colonies. So that's an interesting kind of side note. But winter sports and recreation, Montana ski resorts like Big Sky and Whitefish, those are the biggest ones. We have a lot more. Obviously, we have Sun Valley, Idaho's great, but we have a lot more ski resorts up here. Montana's average snowfall in mountainous areas up to 300 inches annually supports robust winter recreation. Caveats, let's talk about the drawbacks. Montana's winters are harsher with colder temperatures. Average January low in Helena is 14 degrees. Remember, that's the average. It can get cold here. Usually, though, the winters are not long winters, and a real cold, when we get a cold front, usually doesn't last more than 2-3 days. So it's a shorter winter. It's dry, but yes, it is true that the average annual low in Helena, where I was 14 versus Boise, is 25. More snow, which might not suit everybody, so you need to know that. Accessibility. Idaho's proximity to urban hubs like Spokane or Salt Lake makes it slightly more connected. But maybe you don't want to be connected. And that's one of the arguments, too, is that, so Boise is what? Roughly 260,000 people and growing. Our largest city is Billings at 150,000. So we have no big cities. Helena's 30,000. Butte's 35. So that is something to consider as we kind of move into the brave new world, is avoid cities. Avoid big cities. Have large areas. But the drawback of that is it does give, if you perceive that as a drawback, more remote, longer drives. I drive, if I'm not serving here in the Helena area, Saturdays and Sundays, usually I serve Saturday and then go down to Butte, which is an hour drive. Job market. Idaho's tech sector, Boise Silicon Slopes, offers more white-collar opportunities than Montana's resource-based economy, which could be a driving factor for professionals. So, in summary, if you prioritize vast open spaces, lower taxes, iconic national parks, slower paced Western lifestyle, Montana holds an edge. However, preferences like climate, job opportunities, and urban access might tilt the scale towards Idaho. What do you think? Also, how did I lose? I'm going to lose it, huh? In terms of orthodoxy, advantages. We have Orthodox monastery with hopefully monks coming in soon. This monastery is on 1,000 acres. We have 7 Orthodox churches spread out throughout the entire state. 3 different Orthodox jurisdictions, no big cities. And I have to say this is advantage, one of the top 10 rated Orthodox conferences in the world. That is our Orthodox MontaNIKA. So if you are Orthodox, those are advantages. What say you? Let's see what your assessment is in the chat. Of course, I'm biased, but there's a reason why I moved to Montana and not Idaho. Although I like Idaho. I don't have anything against it. It's just, out of all the states, this is my favorite state. And for the reasons, and there's obviously going to be some subjective element in that, but that is my thoughts on the matter. Feeling the Wolf donates £2. Thank you so much. Also, I notice wherever you are, you do get somewhat acclimated to weather. So when you first kind of go somewhere, um, it's kind of hard to adjust, but you eventually, um, like for example, if you go somewhere it feels cold, you'll adjust somewhat. But there are preferences. Some people just can't handle the cold. They need. But I hate like. I mean, I enjoyed the weather in California for the most part, except for like in summers. Sometimes it would get really hot. I remember, and it's unusual, but before we left California that summer, for like a couple days, we got 116 degrees. That's like Vegas, Death Valley, uh, Phoenix weather. Um, and you just you don't leave the house, which I guess is I was talking with Father Thomas in Phoenix when he was showing like a year last year sounded like they're up at like 118 or something. Like, what do you do? And he's like, you don't leave the house. You have the air conditioner. I'm like, I guess that's kind of what you do here when it's minus 20, minus 30, minus 40. Is people are like, what do you do? It's like, you don't leave the house. You have the heater on, and you try to get all your supplies because your car is probably not going to start. And God, don't risk traveling somewhere where there isn't reception. Your car breaks down in that kind of weather. Let's see. I bet this is the orthopedic calling about. Tomorrow I go in to actually, yes, Helena Orthopedic Clinic. I have an appointment at 8:50 tomorrow. Um, we will see where I'm at, and my healing seems to be going really well. If it's healed well enough to put me in this week, or they'll have to postpone it another week on a walking boot where I can finally put pressure. That'll allow me to drive. That'll be really great. And we'll see. So pray for me. The coldest I've experienced here in Montana. This last winter wasn't that cold at all. Um, it was a pretty mild winter. The coldest it probably got for a couple days was minus 20. But the previous two winters, it got to minus 40 for a couple days. Where I'm at, there were obviously areas in Montana, and that's not including wind chill. There were areas like minus 50, probably like Havre and stuff like that. Add the wind chill is probably like minus 75 or something like that. And it's just like a day or two. And then it goes back to minus 10, minus 15. But it was probably averaging, this winter was probably averaging around 14. A lot of days were just kind of zero and stuff. That's not bad at all, especially once you get. I mean, it's crazy. Anything above 0 degrees Fahrenheit, everybody's like so acclimated they're out in shorts. But what I did like about California weather is those over those days over like 105 are rare. Um, and yeah, like it, it's a dry. It's a dry. Usually, eight in the summers 80, 90. Um, the rest of the year kind of 70. Although it can drop, but it wasn't humid. I really don't like humid weather. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I've been in really humid climates before, and it's just I have something where I hate being sticky. If I have any like if you got sugar or honey on your hand, like that drives me crazy. And so, um, feeling sticky from humidity, where you have to shower a couple times a day, is just like I feel dirty. Like it's just gross. Um, yeah, good Newman. That's a great. I heard Jay making a transcendental argument against determinism. Let's go to that. That's a good topic. So again, a type of transcendental argument, the impossibility of the contrary of the other position, and I'd like to read to you um, on an article. Let's go over this. Academia.edu. This is actually from J.P. Moreland. Does a lot of good work. He cites. Where is it? John Searle has a great argument against determinism too. I'm also. Who's the big philosopher that's also arguments against. Hold on, it'll come to me in just a second. Oh my gosh. What is his name? Let me look and see if it's in. You know this guy, he's a famous philosopher. Peter Van Andwagen. But let's go over this argument from J.P. Moreland. It's entitled An Explanation and Defense of Free Thinking. It's called the Free Thinking Argument. And this will illustrate why determinism is a defeater for the possibility of knowledge. You guys want to do that? I live in Helena. I serve in the Helena area, Fridays and Saturdays basically, and Butte, which is the mothership parish I call it, because I'm at a satellite mission parish. The satellite mission is connected to Holy Trinity in Butte. So Sundays I go down to Butte. So I'm between Helena and Butte is where. The difference, Butte is definitely a blue collar steel mining tech, we have Montana Tech there as far as like engineering school, mining school and stuff like that. And Helena there's a lot of politics in Helena because it's the capital. So the legislators here, and that means there's a lot of government jobs available. You could get like any other state that like you'd be on a waiting list for a couple of years. You could get a government job in like a day here in Montana. So we have a lot of government jobs, and that especially in husband tones 499. I'm a Missouri supremacist. All four seasons can happen one. Yeah, that's definitely how it is in Montana. Yes, Newman, it can be turned against. This would apply to any form of determinism. But today, guess what the temperature is today? It's really nice weather. Blooming. It's 53 right now with a high of 71. Sunny. Friday and Saturday. Friday high of 76. Saturday high of 79. Can you believe it? All right, let's go into it's also, this applies to not only determinism, but obviously naturalism as well. Free thinking argument is part of a family of arguments that have been developed by thinkers such as C.S. Lewis, J.P. Moreland, Alvin Plantinga, Jim Slagle. The free thinking argument, hereafter FTA, not FDA, FTA, seeks to discredit the thesis of determinism. Determinism is the idea that antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate all events or effects, often referred to as causal determinism. Exhaustive divine determinism, so this Newman applies to your question, would be the Calvinist position, hereafter EDD, is the idea that God necessitates all events, especially all things about humanity, which would include all desires, thoughts, intuitions, beliefs, actions, behaviors, evaluations, judgments. It's important to note that the antecedent conditions are either sufficient or insufficient to necessitate all effects. So that's why you just have to come up with one way to deal with this. We'll see is to prove that if it says they're sufficient, you show that they're insufficient. FTA is typically aimed at naturalism and the complete determinism of humanity, which seems to be entailed by this view. The free thinking quiz. To feel the force of the argument, let's begin by answering a few questions. The first one, are we infallible? Everyone seems to know that he or she does not know everything. In fact, it seems that every mature and rational person is willing to admit that, at least on occasion. This is really interesting. We affirm false beliefs. That is to say, we know that each of us holds, affirms, and often advances beliefs that we really think are true and rationally justified, but are actually false. This leads to the next question. At least sometimes, at a certain time and place, when we're affirming a false belief, is it possible for us in those circumstances to take our faulty thinking captive and think correctly? When we're affirming false beliefs, that is, do we possess the power and opportunity to act or think differently? And be a bit more careful to reach true conclusions about the reality of specific circumstances. I hope you can appreciate where this is going. The power to think and act and be more careful than how something external to us determines us seems to be a powerful, worth wanting, having, but how one answers these questions has significant ramifications on one's worldview. We contend that if we possess the power to, at least occasionally, evaluate our current thoughts, beliefs, rationally judge them as good, bad, right, or wrong, and then take our faculty thoughts captive and replace them with proper thoughts, because this gets into the whole notion of justification, proper, right thought, without changing the antecedent, then we possess libertarian freedom. This kind of freedom, that of deliberation, refers to a person's choice, action, evaluation, thought, or judgment that is not ultimately determined by something or someone else. This implies that at least occasionally we act as rational agents and freely form our judgments for which we are rationally responsible. This implication also entails that it is we ourselves not our overall antecedent mental states or characters that brings about our judgments. Richard Taylor puts it this way, quote, "In the case of an action that is free, it must not only be such that it is caused by the agent who performs it, but also such that no antecedent conditions were sufficient for performing just that action." It's kind of a good definition of what a free action means. So the action's attributed to the agent and not something antecedent condition that would sufficient. Now, so remember the difference between sufficient and necessary. Necessary conditions do not determine, they're just required in order to do something. Sufficient determines the consequent. We understand the libertarian freedom then as the ability to choose such that antecedent conditions are insufficient to causally determine or necessitate one's choice. We have applied this definition to thinking. Libertarian freedom includes the ability to think such that antecedent conditions are insufficient to causally determine or necessitate one's thoughts and ensuing beliefs. This application of libertarian freedom to thinking holds whether or not one possesses alternative possibilities from which to choose. We refer to the idea as weak libertarian. One simply needs to be the first mover of these choices and thoughts. We refer to this idea as weak libertarian freedom. However, if one does face opportunities to choose among alternative possibilities in the real world, strong libertarian freedom, and has the power to choose among them with no changes in mental conditions at the time of choice, then it follows that one is not determined by something. So one of the issues here that you see is the determinist begs the question. They already presuppose their position, which is the thing in question. For example, incorrect understanding of what reason and cause may be, and a collapsing between the necessary and sufficient conditions in terms of causality. So if you look at an agent's action, there's always a reason and cause of that action. So, however, so they'll say, well, look, principle of sufficient reason, you go to the grocery store, why did you do that? And you'll list certain beliefs, certain conditions in the world, that the road was not closed, and etc. And they'll say, well, see, then you were caused to do that, you weren't free. Well, that misses the whole point. Wait a minute. Just because I have a reason to do something doesn't mean the reason determines me. Okay, so they're not being accurate about what is the reason? Is it a necessary or sufficient? It's necessary to have a reason, and every action will have a reason, but it doesn't mean the reason determines me. In fact, the agent who performs it, such that there's no antecedent conditions that are sufficient, that's what we're arguing for. I have multiple reasons. I could say, I just like going to the grocery store. I need some food, etc. I can choose because the agent stands above those reasons and isn't causally determined in a sufficient way by any antecedent cause, right? So they're just begging the question. And they're collapsing the distinction between just because something is a cause, is it a necessary or sufficient? So that's one of the problems. But we can refute this. He defines strong libertarian freedom in this manner: the opportunity to exercise the ability to choose between at least two options. Yeah, so I just gave you each of which is compatible with one's nature in specific circumstances where the antecedent conditions are insufficient to causally determine me or necessitate agent's choice. At the moment of choice, one can do A or B without any antecedent change. Again, you always have a reason to do that, but it doesn't mean that the reason, therefore, is an antecedent cause that causally determines. Causes that to. One second. I did get. All right. That's a fancy way of saying the ability to do otherwise. Let's check in with you in the chat real quick, see if you're following along. Are you paying attention to what I'm saying? All right, any questions so far? All right, let me just check in real quick and we'll go back. All right, let's go back. The ability to do otherwise is not necessary to have libertarian freedom. However, to assume a Christian biblical perspective, if one possesses this opportunity and ability to choose otherwise, as implied in 1 Corinthians 10:13, then this is sufficient to demonstrate libertarian freedom. Ultimately, if one cannot demonstrate strong libertarian, but can demonstrate weak libertarian freedom, one has demonstrated libertarian freedom and dispatched the idea of determinism. So whether we go with either one, if we could prove that, it obviously refutes determinism. So let's reframe the last question. When engaged in deliberation and belief formation, do we sometimes possess the opportunity and ability to act, think, and be more careful when we are thinking things through, or does something or someone else always determine exactly what we think of and about, and more importantly, determine exactly how we think of and about it? Are we ever epistemically responsible, in a desert sense, for any of our thoughts and beliefs? Or is sometimes or someone else ultimately responsible for all of our thoughts and beliefs? In a process of deliberation, are we genuinely responsible active agent who is steering the ship, or are we passive patient spectators, passengers simply along for the ride, wanting to see what the antecedent causal chain that begins before deliberative process and runs through our mental states will end up causing? This is, and we'll see, where this is going too. If you are determined to think what you are and you can't actually correct it, you can't actually be responsible. There is no agency. There is no responsibility. And in fact, you could be caused to believe that determinism is true when it's false, and you would have no manner of correcting that or being responsible or being more careful, because why? That implies agency and some level of freedom to break from the causal determination of the sufficient antecedent conditions that would determine you. And so there's no way to actually know, and therefore determinism is self-refuting. Now, of course, it'd be like, well, it's just true, right? That's basically what yeah, but you don't have any way of determining that because you're caused to believe, you could be caused to believe, as it starts off, that false beliefs are actually true. And so you're just repeating what's in question. But if it's true, that's all that matters. Yeah, but how do we know that? Well, because you'd be determined of that. Well, then there is no deliberation. You're not generally responsible and you wouldn't be able to know. So you just keep repeating the same thing. Note that the range of alternative options available from which to choose incoherent thoughts, beliefs versus coherent thoughts and beliefs. Recall that if determinism is true and exhaustively describes a causal story of humanity, then if something else determines us to affirm a falsehood, then it's impossible for us to infer a better or true belief in the same circumstances. Correct? Think about that. Can I infer a better or a true belief in the same circumstances? No. It's impossible for us to think otherwise if someone else is determining us, preventing us from thinking otherwise in that very circumstance. If all things regarding the human are determined by something other than the human qua responsible agent, then there does not seem to be any room for epistemically responsible thinking. With that in mind, let us return to the last question. If we answer yes, then our answer logically implies libertarian freedom, as we affirm, and then obviously determines it's false. However, if we answer no, then several problems arise with respect, here's the heart of the matter. Then several problems arise with respect to the notion of reason, as illustrated in the following two questions. Number one, why trust our answer? Yeah, good way of putting it. Number two, why should anyone listen to our passive opinions about anything, including this topic? It's good, huh? Further, is that which determined our thoughts and beliefs a reliable source? If not, significant problems arise. And how would you know that? If so, then how could we possibly know that? Yeah. Note that the implication of these problems arising from determinism are not merely the opinions of Christian theologians or apologists. Indeed, notable atheistic philosophers have also reached the implicit conclusion that is surfaced by previous two questions. Libertarian freedom is necessary for active use of reason. So this is why, Newman, we're getting to a transcendental argument by possibility of the contrary. Determinism would make knowledge and rationality itself impossible. It's self-defeating. Okay, scholarly support. Consider Evan Fales an atheist. What a name. Evan Fales. Shoot. I don't know if that's worse than a boy named Sue. He's a philosopher, he's an atheist who seems to support the case that libertarian freedom, specifically the categorical ability to choose or choose otherwise, is necessary to exercise the use of reason. Fales seems to be a libertarian who applies libertarian freedom to thinking, deliberation, rationale. He says, I personally happen to have views about freedom of the will, which are libertarian. I situate myself in a long tradition that tries most fundamentally to understand freedom of the will as a matter of having the capacity to exercise reason. Rational choice. In fact, to me, the act of freely deciding is the act of rationally deliberating. Unfortunately, Fales has it backward. Yeah, exactly. It is the act of rational deliberation that is an example of acting freely, not the converse. Good, well stated. Nevertheless, the problem does not affect his overall point. Fales continues, I'm a libertarian when it comes to free will, and that's not common for atheists, at least for naturalists. The reason why, however, most naturalists reject libertarian freedom is because libertarian freedom does not seem to fit nicely with most accounts of naturalism. And here, John Searle, another atheistic philosopher who I wrote my PhD thesis on, agrees that determinism is compatible with rationality. He states, actions are rationally accessible if and only if the actions are free. The reason for the connection is this. Rationality must be able to make a difference. Well put, right? Otherwise, it's not rational. Rationality is possible only when there is genuine libertarian choice between various rational and irrational courses of action. Isn't that true? The ability to be able to say, what's true and false to be able to assess that and to say, even this is why this aren't good reasons and why you ended up falsehood, or even vice versa. You got to true belief accidentally or for the wrong reasons is exactly what we mean by rationality. And that requires and implies genuine libertarian choice between what's rational and irrational, what's true and false as well. If the act were completely determined, then rationality makes no difference. Rationality doesn't even come to play. Not only does Searle reject determinism, he clearly affirms that alternative possibilities are essentially for rational action choice earlier in the same book. Quote, rationality is only possible where irrationality is possible. Wow, that's a great point. But the possibility of each requires freedom. So in order to behave rationally, I can do so only if I am free to make any number of possible choices and have open the possibility of behaving irrationally. That's why it goes back to the first question, are you infallible? Now he goes on to say, when we perform consciously voluntary actions, we typically have a sense of alternative possibilities. Possessing access, and there it is, possessing access to alternative choice, options, possibilities, in a specific circumstances is the epitome of strong libertarian freedom. Angus J.L. Manoog notes that Searle affirms a libertarian freedom that includes a genuine ability to choose otherwise. Quote, rationality presupposes an entity with libertarian free will that can only act on some reasons rather than others. So notice you even have kind of a presuppositionalism here that to even talk about knowledge, justification, rationality, etc., you've already presupposed a Christian worldview, a libertarian. So determinism leads to contradiction. Why? Because I'm presupposing A and not A at the same time. So not only is it self-defeating that make knowledge impossible, it's actually contradictory in terms of its presuppositions, because the very meaning of rationality entails libertarian free will, which is a similar argument that the very notion of something being accident presupposes what? Intention. Accident is logically and semantically implies that which deviates from intention. So you can't have pure act. This is an argument from Aristotle. There is no such thing. There's no semantic or logical meaning in accidentalism or pure chance. Why? Because what the word means is I had an intention and something else happened by accident. So it implies a world of intentionality. So the atheist who assumes accidentalism is actually contradicting themselves. Why? Because they're assuming both A and not A. They're assuming accidentalism and intentionalism, which are mutually exclusive and therefore self-refuting. Also, Manoog means by genuine ability is the categorical ability. Given choices A or B, the agent can choose either without anything changing in the agent at the time of choice. This contrasts with the compatibilist determinist notion of the ability to do otherwise. On this view, compatibilism, such ability is conditional. If certain beliefs or desires are present within an agent, he necessarily must choose A. However, the agent could have chosen B if an alternative set of beliefs, desires had been present and necessitated the choice of B. By the way, this is exactly why we reject, as Orthodox Christians, compatibilism. As he points out here, this does not seem like an ability to do otherwise worth having exactly. All right, what are you guys doing in the chat? Let me pause here and answer any questions. But Danny has a question about studying Dedekind and the Dedekind cut. Where is my Dedekind? Oh, Lord. even remember why I brought that up. Is it this? Preserved in a pristine state after the ice thaw. Do you vaguely remember what the context was? Essays on Number Theory, Dedekind, Richard Dedekind. The continuity. So the Dedekind cut's really difficult. It's basically the continuity in irrational numbers and number lines and stuff like that to make it work out. And but what was the question exactly? My PhD paper is on my academia.edu. It's called An Alternative Theory of Mind, Lessons from Søren Lonergan. I don't even remember that. I brought up Dedekind to prove free will. That's crazy, man. That's crazy, man. You're crazy. I don't remember that. My experience was it was difficult. Dedekind's actually number theory is incredibly difficult. Yeah, so Sower Cookie points out there's the whole, and that's what Immanuel Kant brought up. It means you're not morally responsible for anything. There's no morality in. Free will requires you to be able to choose evil. But the fathers would reject. But we do have the ability to choose evil, right? I mean, I don't get it. Yes, of course all we have to do is look at Twitter to realize people have the ability to act irrationally. Right. Yeah, there's nothing good or evil about. It destroys normativity, so you can't even say that even in terms of nature, natural objects, that they're deficient in any way. And it also destroys, so not only the possibility of knowledge, but even kind of more fundamental, the distinction between what's true or false. Everything's just cashed out in events. There's no true event versus false event. And if your belief that you think is knowledge and true is just another event, it's neither true nor false. It's just another event. So it doesn't even get to. So not only is it self-defeating in terms of knowledge, that knowledge requires the ability to, as I said, to choose or act irrationally, have bad reasons versus good reasons, and therefore justification. Therefore, it's a defeater for knowledge. It deflates the distinction. Like there's nothing even true. Because truth implies what? There's a distinction between the true and the false. So they can't even say like an event is true. It's just there's no truth to it. I mean, think about how this works out logically. In logic, proposition truth in one sense is a property of propositions. Not every sentence is a proposition. A proposition is a sentence that's capable of having a truth value, and by truth value that means true or false. So if there's no ability for even a proposition to be false, then it can't even be predicated to be true. No, choosing evil is not necessary for free will. And even the way that they defined it, it's simply the ability to choose at least between two things, A or B. So those things could be goods, not evil. Obviously, a fortiori, if there's more than just two choices. But evil does exist, so you can choose evil. It's just free will is not dependent on the choice between good or evil, but simply, as stated in the article, the choice between two things of which they could be goods. But you can't. Yeah, as far as irrationality, so they're doing a couple different things. First, it's defining what free will is. That's separate but related to the idea of rationality. Free will is simply the agent can choose between at least two options, of which antecedent conditions are insufficient to determine the choice. Okay. Then it ties into rationality. Rationality specifically then is only rational when it has a choice to be irrational. Okay, see how it works? So, if you are causally determined, that is, there's antecedent sufficiency that determine your act, there's no way that you could actually act. When you say, well, but the determinist says, but this is the rational position, but it's like, well, if you don't have the ability to choose to be irrational, then you're not rational. Just like I said, if a proposition doesn't have the logical and semantic ability to be false, then it can't be true either. Because a proposition is defined as one that has a truth value, and truth value is either true or false. Does that make sense? Yeah, sometimes it depends. It depends on who it is. It depends on my time, what the topic is. Um, Sorry, I'm not Sour cookie. I'm not understanding that. Something's only rational if you have the ability to act irrational. The ability then implies choice. And then choice, in general, not speaking about rationality, is simply just defined the choice between two options. It's just choice with respect to rationality means the ability to choose to be irrational. Does that make sense? All right, let's go back. To see why we say this, note first of all that our FTA, the free thinking argument, provides defeaters, there it is, for hard determinism and compatibilism construed as entailing determinism. Furthermore, it is determinism that is the main problem addressed by our argument. Yes. This becomes evident when we focus our attention on the nature of deterministic, efficient causal chains of events. The causal relation among the successive relata in such chains, the events, is transitive, and therein lies the rub. Suppose we take an arbitrary section of such a chain, say, events E3 through E9. Given transitivity, if E3 causes E4 and E4 causes E5, then it is really E3 that causes E5, or better, E3 causes E4 causing E5. Here, E3 is actually efficient cause of E5, and E4 is merely a passive instrumental cause through which E3 causes E5. That's transitive property right there. However, we'll recall that E3 through E9 is an arbitrary selection of a longer causal chain. Given transitivity, all relata in the deterministic efficient causal series are passive instrumental causes. Causes. As has been shown repeatedly in the context of arguments of God's existence, without a first unmoved mover, a non-caused causer, no causation can be passed down through the passive change of instrumental causes. Furthermore, such a first mover is a libertarian agent with the power to initiate spontaneously causal action without having something else cause it to. That's interesting. I never thought about that. If there isn't a first mover, there is no motion or causation whatsoever. But the first mover, to be a first mover is to be an uncaused causer. And if there's and that entails what? That God, the first mover, is a libertarian agent. This is really interesting. I never even thought about that. And if it isn't, then he's not a first, he's a second, third, fourth, and then we're back to the infinite regress, in which case there is no motion or change in the world, but there is, therefore, there must be a first mover who's a libertarian agent. The same argument applies to the need for a libertarian agent to initiate a series of instrumental causes in light of some teleological end. And notice that's kind of what I was talking earlier. Just because you have a reason or you act through a reason, that's a teleological end, doesn't mean that the end is antecedent. By definition, it's the end. It's a teleological cause and not an efficient cause. So notice they're getting causes mixed up. I have tons of different reasons to do stuff, and those are teleological ends. I want groceries. I'm friends with the cashier. I'd like to stop by, say hi. I just like going to the grocery store. But teleological causes are not efficient causes. So you made a mistake there. It's precisely the lack of any grounding from an originative source and subsequent transfer of efficient causal power that renders deterministic chains a choice. Admittedly, these points do not exhaust our development of the FTA, but they are an important part of it. And this is especially relevant to the claim that this argument succeeds against hard determinism and standard compatibilism. Returning to the issue of alternative possibilities, if Searle's notion of alternative possibilities is correct, then even if one asserts that libertarian freedom is possessed by humanity, but the opportunity to exercise an ability to think or judge otherwise does not, then what do we have? Then nothing about humanity ever really makes any difference. Exactly. This is the case because no one would ever possess an opportunity to exercise an ability to think other than the way they actually do. And by the way, that's where you say, well, you just if you take that position, you forfeited debate. Why? Well, you can't think other the way that you do, and I can't think the other way that I do. Like, do you see what the problem is? In a world in which we all hold false beliefs, the power, as Searle says, to make a difference seems to be the power worth wanting. Lacking such implies that no one is rationally responsible. Yeah, so you can't say your position is rational because there is no rational responsibility, therefore there's no rationality. We can't help but think what we do. So it doesn't matter if it's true or false, does it? That's an interesting argument. So I'm always really like, well, is your truth? It doesn't matter. How many people have ever brought that argument? Nobody brings that up. We usually focus on that it's a defeater. You couldn't know that it's true, but how about that? It doesn't matter because I can't think otherwise. I can't change my position, so it doesn't make a difference whether my belief's true or false. Isn't that an interesting? What do you guys think about that argument? Even if I granted that your position's true and mine is false, it doesn't make a difference because I can't help. So none of this matters. Can something... No, it doesn't seem logically possible that one can act without a reason for acting. That seems just to be... what do they call that? Psychological motivation. Act implies that... that's interesting. So again, I think it goes back to the accident. There's nothing that's purely accidental. It's relative. So I could have a potential intention or idea to do something and I wasn't paying attention. Like, I didn't have a reason because I wasn't thoughtful. Like, something happened and I didn't. But it's always defined relative to that there's a logical possible reason and I didn't do that. So it already presupposes reason and intention, even when... But how would that apply to God, who's omniscient? Like, he's not like he's not paying attention. And furthermore, it's just a red herring because showing something... And it's not... Remember, it's not indeterminate because there's still necessary... what do they say? There's still things that play causes, right? Even if you're unaware. And causes that don't necessarily determine. That's why they're indeterminate. So none of that's a defeater for agency. Does that make sense? How would you... Yeah, I thought about this today. How would you reply to extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence? I'd probably say, oh yeah, okay, I agree with... So what? The problem is, how do you determine what's extraordinary and what qualifies as evidence versus mundane evidence versus extraordinary evidence? Yeah, what's the standard for extraordinary evidence? Why not say that, like, tag is like extraordinary evidence? I mean, the impossibility of the contrary and the positive account that that it fulfills all the necessary conditions that any system desires to account for and justify the existence of knowledge, like, that doesn't seem pretty extra. It does the work that you want to do, and it's impossible. The contrary is impossible. Isn't that extraordinary evidence? It's the best. All right, let's go. Back. Sam Harris. Oh, here we go. Anyways, regarding this view, philosophers Moreland and Billy Craig write, if one is to have justified beliefs, then one must be free to obey or disobey epistemic rules. I've made this argument before. Otherwise, one could not be held responsible for his intellectual behavior, right? And the example that I use going over in my naturalized epistemology paper is Epistemology Naturalized, I forget the title of it, where I'm going through the Quine stuff. And you can find, I think that paper's on at myacademia.edu. And remember what we talked about when we were over Duncan Pritchard. Knowledge is not simply hitting the bullseye and getting a true belief, but for the right reasons. And that it's reasonable. So, if I get a parrot to say, 2 plus 2 is 4, that's a true, and let's say we say it's some sort of belief that it has. There's some cognitive connection to what, is that knowledge? Let me do a better one. Because I caused the parrot to actually say that. The saying can be interpreted as a belief, therefore the parrot has knowledge. That's not the case. Furthermore, what if I did brain surgery on you? Every time I prod the temporal lobe with electric, what's the word I want to use? A frequency, like electrical frequency probe your brain and hit, and you form a belief. 2 plus 2 is 4. So you're caused to believe that. And I could just switch it a little bit more, and I could cause you to believe it's 5. So the cause is exactly, the antecedent cause is exactly the same. It's just one way I move it. It's just arbitrary. It causes you to believe something true, and the other will cause it to be false. You can't believe otherwise. So it doesn't make a difference. Would you say, well, when I just happen to turn it right and give the electrical impulse, you get a true belief? Would you call that knowledge? No, you'd be like, it's not for the right, because you weren't able to do otherwise. You couldn't disobey. There was no agency. So we don't say that even if you do get a right answer, it's accidental. Even if it's necessarily determined by the sufficient cause. It's like, because you couldn't do otherwise. You're not responsible. It's not responsible intellectual behavior. It can't be rational. Can't be knowledge. The phrase to obey or disobey implies alternative possibilities when it comes to thinking, rationale, and intellectual behavior. Accordingly, if one is not intellectually or epistemically responsible for their mental behavior, then one does not possess justification for any resulting belief. This is a major problem if justification is required for knowledge. Now, I've actually seen people, as you might have seen my debate with, well, the great thing about my theory is I don't require justification for something to be knowledge. As they proceed to give me justification why that theory at the second order level is true, and you could know it. Absolutely sophistry. The salient point is this: if rationally intuited or inferred knowledge claims are illusory, then one cannot rationally affirm such claims. Interesting. So if it's illusory, then how can you say it's rationally affirm such claims? However, the ability and power to rationally intuit, infer, and justify affirm knowledge claims seems to be desirable. We should not be too quick to give it up. The well-known naturalist Sam Harris, however, surrenders it rather quickly. Harris writes, quote, "Thoughts and intentions emerge from background causes of which we are unaware and over which we exert no conscious control. Either our wills are determined by prior causes and we are not responsible for them, or the product of chance and we're not responsible." So this has come up before. That notice the false dichotomy fallacy. Either you have reasons for your actions and beliefs or you don't. If you don't, everything's random and product of chance. If it isn't the case, then you're determined. Well, what's the problem? It only gave you two options. That something either has a cause or it doesn't, and that all causes must be antecedent sufficient causes that are determined. Well, that's exactly what's in question, you dummy. So the either or fails. I have reason, remember, teleological ends that are not antecedent, i.e. they're not efficient causes. They're not antecedent causes that sufficiently determine my choice. So your whole framing is fallacious. According to all of our thoughts, what we think of, how we think about it, intentionality, and ultimately all our beliefs are either causally determined by antecedent conditions or they're merely the product of chance, none of which is up to humanity. It follows, however, that if one assumes that exhaustive causal determination of humanity, as Sam Harris does, then it's self-defeating to argue for exhaustive causal determination of humanity. Exactly. Consider the fact that if the forces and events of nature causally determine Harris to affirm a false belief about X in the actual world, then Harris does not possess an opportunity to exercise an ability to infer a better or a true belief about X in circumstance. Next, consider the following argument. A1. If exhaustive naturalistic determinism hereafter end, END, is true, then the forces and events of nature causally determine all humans, including Harris, to infer and affirm some false metaphysical beliefs. No one's infallible. A2. If the forces and events of nature causally determine all humans to infer and affirm some false metaphysical beliefs, then Harris stands in no epistemic position to know which of his inferred metaphysical beliefs are true and which are false. Yeah. A3, if Harris does not stand in a position to know which of his inferred metaphysical beliefs are true and which are false, then Harris possesses a defeater against, i.e. a reason to doubt, said metaphysical beliefs. 4, if Harris possesses reason to doubt said metaphysical beliefs, then Harris cannot rationally affirm said metaphysical beliefs. This would include his affirmations of END, exhaustive naturalistic determinism, that the forces of and events of nature causally determine all things that humans do and possess libertarian freedom to think. Therefore, 5, if END is true, Harris cannot rationally affirm END. So it's a more detailed argument that I've given. If determinism's true and determinism can lead you to a false belief because they're arguing with you, that you've been determined to believe that determinism's false. Well, you could be determined to believe something's false. Yes. Then you can't actually rationally affirm, because you couldn't help but thinking a false belief is true, and that determinism is true when it's false, so determinism is self-defeating. So this is kind of a more detailed argument of that. Note that the forces of events of nature are outside the genuine control of the person. Diachronically, these forces and events are constituents in a causal chain that begin before the person was ever born, specifically before the person began to reason and infer. Synchronically, these forces and events are constituents in a causal chain that comes from outside the person, passively enter and pass through the physical and mental processes or mental states of the person, and eventually cause passive body movements on the way out of the person. In this way, the person is a mere theater of physical and mental states that constitute a puppet show in the theater. Neither the theater nor the puppets actually do anything, and thus are not rationally responsible agents. Recall Searle once again, quote, "If the act is completely determined, then rationality can make no difference. Ultimately, it is it's simply self-defeating to argue for or affirm determinism." Epistemologist Robert Locke concludes that if one affirms determinism, then one cannot be epistemically justified in her embrace. Notice all determinism's effeminate. He uses, right? It's only females would embrace feminism, and determinism, and that includes Sam Harris. Sam Harris, what have we learned today? Sam Harris is actually a woman. That's logic right there. That's just logical deduction, right? He's using here. Okay. Then one cannot epistemically be justified to embrace embrace adoption, articulated defense of determinism. Epistemic justification seems to be worth desiring and having, whereas self-defeat is not worth desiring. Oh, Oppie. Look at Oppie, dude. Wonk, wonk, wonk. All right, let me check in on all y'all. Make sure you're still breathing. Do I need to do epistemic CPR on you? Are you still breathing? Do we have a pulse? Samantha Harris. Yeah, let me put this in. You guys can follow along with this. Good. I'll put the link in the chat. Yeah. We need epistemic CPR. The person does not have an epistemic pulse. Yeah, congratulations, you just forfeited the debate. Yeah, they do. So much time debating absurdity and running from the obvious. I think I actually named my bachelor's thesis I defended at Thomas Aquinas College. I misspoke. I had you can't run forever, and I misspoke once and I said you can't run from ever, and I was like, what a weird phrase. I'm like, everlasting, everness, like obviously I had this notion of God, and I'm like, that's a great thesis title. You can't run from ever. Can't run from God. All right. That is a good question. I don't know if I ever published my bachelor's thesis. I don't hold to those views anymore. I was defending Anselm's argument against the Thomists. I loved that argument, but when I was a man child, when I was a man child in the primordial soup of academia and the intelligentsia, I did one time believe that was the best argument. I have seen the error of my ways. Once I evolved out of the primordial epistemic soup of the filth pool of academia, I realized my errors. What can I say? So maybe that's why I didn't publish it. There was a BBC podcast documentary on Texas Orthodoxy recently? Or was it an old one? Let me see if I did publish it. Almost all my papers or writings are on academia, but that one's obviously one of the first academic works that I've ever done. Let's see what's in academia.edu. I don't think so. Four drafts. One, two, three, four, five. My master's thesis is in there. Yeah, it's not. I'll have to look where. Okay. Any super chats? No. Why am I teaching for free? Come on, man. What come on doing all this for free? Dave and Filling the Wolf are the only ones that have given super chats today. Come on. Very nice. A student wrote me. I love it when students do this. They let me know what assignments they went back in and completed, so I don't have to go through every single one on every single assignment and look for missing. Thank you. I'm gonna sit here silent until we get a super chat. Yeah, I wasn't the best writer in. I mean, I guess you could say that one of the downsides of Thomas Aquinas College is, I don't really know how you fix this, because you're reading so much, you're doing math proofs, studying for Latin, doing labs, studying for philosophy and theology. You'd have to basically write cases and come in and present. Then all the literature stuff, there just wasn't enough time, and so there wasn't really kind of a lot of emphasis put on writing and developing your writing skills. There's no fault of the program. It's just impossible given how much you're doing that to be able to do that. And so I wasn't the best writer. And I remember when I went into my master's, like, I had some professors even pointed that out. They're like, you write like a retard. You're writing retarded. And you talk like a... No, I'm joking. That's a line from Idiocracy. I had help. Like, I had some good professors that worked with me, and obviously in a master's you're writing multiple papers, the multiple in the class, and I just learned, I guess. Also, I think, and this is what I've assigned my students, when they have basically a paper, a rough draft, and then a final draft. And what I do is that I assign them study editing partners. So like they submit their rough drafts to one another. Rather than me simply giving feedback, I create an assignment where they have to lean into each other. And they have to do editing work for the other person. And the reason why I do that is it's not only mutually beneficial as far as you're getting somebody to do some editing for you. When you're editing papers, you improve in your writing. So I had to teach what's called modules as a TA in grad school for the professors who just did lectures. And part of the module, this is where all the coursework, right? Like, the professors are bigwigs, guys. They just go, they don't have to do any grading. Some even have their personal secretaries. They just go and give a huge lecture, a lecture in front of a huge lecture hall, and then the TAs basically teach the courses and do all the grading. And so I had hundreds and hundreds of papers to grade. However, in doing so, it actually helped improve my writing. So that's kind of my history of how I went from a retard writer to somewhat proficient. Does editing someone else's writing involve changing the phrasing or ordering the sentence? What I do is I tell them to look for grammatical errors, make suggestions on if there's an awkward sentence or something like that. But it's ultimately free will choice to deliberate and say, like, do I want to apply that or something like. They're just putting in suggestions. All right. We will remain quiet until we get a super chat. Let's just take a moment of silence. Let's bow our heads. Yes. It's like, the carnival where it's like, you have to put the coin. Mango donates $9.99 and has activated Father Robo-Deacon. I do feel like Father Robo-Deacon now. Build back better deacon. Bionomics of the anatomy of my leg. They built him faster, stronger, more steel. And here we go. I'm back with 9.99. Mango, thanks for teaching us. Thank you. What is that anyways? YouTube. We can build them better. We can... Jim Bob! He's always at the same time as me. I can't compete with Jim Bob. Let's see if we can play this real quick. Yes, here it is.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology. We have the capability to make the world's first bionic man. Better than he was before. Better. Stronger.
There's my leg. There's a surgery.
Faster.
I'm back. I am back. Robo Deacon, Robo Legs. Look how fast I run. Yeah. There he goes. Epistemic hurdle. Yeah, dude. Look at that. Woo! That was great. There's me. There I am. Robo Deacon, build back better. We can make him faster, stronger. Bionic Deacon. Crushing philosophical paradigms better than before. That's why I come. Build back better Deacon. Yes. That's my new campaign. Okay, let's go back. To Graham Oppie. Graham Oppie, 2022, wrote, quote, "There is next to nothing in metaphysics on which there's even bare majority agreement among metaphysicians. Indeed, the same can be said of Christian theologians discussing anything besides the proposition that God raised Jesus from the dead, what C.S. Lewis referred to as mere Christianity. It stands to reason that the nature of God has not granted metaphysicians or theologians with the infallibility or perfect set of metaphysical or theological beliefs, except for orthodoxy. Since it seems that something or someone else, like God, is not determining humanity to always reach true beliefs, then it follows that if one's noetic structure is functioning properly, then libertarian freedom is, at least in some circumstances, a vital ingredient in the rationality mix. Hence, if the broad ability to be a free thinker has been lost. By the way, let's campaign that. You know, let's take back and give that a new meaning. You know, it talks about people were like, I'm a free thinker. I'm a libertarian. Well, what we mean by that is epistemic, not I ain't controlled by the man. I don't gotta go to church or listen to any authority. I never get those people. Like, church is just an oppressive. Lowercase c, yeah, sure. I grant that. The church, you've never been, you don't know. It's an institution. That's the man telling you. Because what does God love? Anarchy. He just loves people. Absolute libertine freedom to do whatever you want for no good reasons whatsoever and to not have any structure. I mean, have these people even thought this through? Like, that's what you're encouraging? Radical individualism, libertinism, and irrationality and chaos. Chaos, no! Hey, bucko! Sounds more like a woke ideology of your mother. I reject everything you said as absolutely retarded. That's what I'm going to start telling people when they say that. But like, it's this. Okay? This is the clip we have to have when we hear. And I was talking with Discord folks that were asking, how do we respond to this? Seriously, I have nightmares going to sleep. How do we respond, Father Deacon? How would we? An atheist said, bleh. An atheist threw up in their mouth and had verbal diarrhea. What do we say? Why are you giving these clowns attention? Make fun of them. What do you say when somebody has verbal diarrhea and thinks that that was super intelligent and smart? Do you engage in it? Do you lather yourself up in the vomit and roll around in it? What does the matter with you kids? It's dumb. It's not an argument and response. They're not going to listen to you. Why do they respond to this? So, hey man, I think that, yeah, you know what I think? Churches are just like man-made control institutions, man, and you know, yeah, that you should just be free, like as long as you're like a good person, man. What was it saying? Like you should just be like free to do. You know, my God is like chaos. Yeah, man. It's all anarchy. There's no structure or order. Why don't you apply that to? Well, that's a great idea. In fact, let's have that legally. Let's have the workplace. And everybody could just be free to do every stupid thing that they want to. Like, that's what you're trying to sell me on? These things need to be shamed. We need this queued up when people say stuff like that. Ready? I'm going to get dinged on this. I'm going to have to edit it out, but whatever. There, we have to have that queued up for people who say stuff like that. And may God have mercy on your soul. All right, let's go back. Hence, if the broad ability to be a free thinker, and we took back that word, has been lost, and one is not free or does not have opportunities to actively employ the use of reason in appropriate circumstance, then something seems to have gone terribly wrong with one's thinking faculties. Perhaps they've been damaged via brain tumor, head trauma. Perhaps you're just brain rot. Atheism or Protestantism has caused your head trauma. And everything comes out of your mouth is now verbal and logical semantic diarrhea, because you failed to take your thoughts captive for far too long. It has caused self-inflicted damage to your own cognitive faculties. Let's call this an epistemic evil. Interesting. So not only is it epistemic retardedness, let's call it epistemic evil. Since we are obviously not the kind of creatures who are always determined to believe truth, we better hope that we are not determined to affirm false metaphysical and theological beliefs. Indeed, and by the way, that's my defeater for Calvinism too. I can't remember. I think it was a commentary on Calvin's commentary on Corinthians or something. I can't remember. One of St. Paul's epistles, where he says even the elect, God can give over to a reprobate mind and believe things that are false. He can causally determine them to do that. Well, then I thought, well, so if Calvin's an elect, suppose he were, but his theory of Calvinism could be God giving him over to a reprobate mind to believe something false, then likewise Calvinism itself is defeated. And I had that argument in my back pocket for the Matt Slick debate. And never even got there. Because we went to the kind of epistemic argument of how do we justify what Scripture is from your position. So we never even left to the ground to the next level to actually show why his Calvinist positions are actually self-defeating, but it's a similar argument here. Indeed, it seems that if EDD is true, then we're left with nothing but skepticism. Surely the power to infer true beliefs is greater and more desirable than passively determined to affirm false beliefs. In other words, fused with false beliefs, the active use of reason to rationally infer better and best, let alone true explanations, and rationally affirm knowledge claims, something definitely worth wanting, requires libertarian freedom. Mad scientist to the rescue. The following thought experiment illustrates the necessity of libertarian freedom when it comes to rationality and the active use of reason. Suppose a mad scientist, Fauci, Dr. Fauci, give us disease. Remember that guy, poor kid? Dr. Fauci, give us vaccines. That poor kid, dude. His name is and reputation will be tainted for the rest of his life because his mom got him up, got his tism on display and took advantage of. By the way, we do know that autistic people are very easily manipulated and taken advantage of. So that's actually kind of sad. That's why do you think they propped up Greta as the spokesperson, the champion of the climate cult, and the Malthusian Depop cult. Suppose a mad scientist has somehow implanted microchips in a person's brain while she was sleeping. Always the she's, man. And now exhaustively controls and determines all of her thoughts and beliefs. Well, that would explain a lot, right? This includes exactly what she thinks of and about, and more importantly, exactly how she thinks of and about it. All of her evaluations and judgments. All of her thoughts about her beliefs and all of her beliefs about her thoughts are now determined by the mad scientist. She has no opportunity to think or believe otherwise. She has zero guidance control over what she thinks or how she thinks about it. All her passive thoughts are completely up to and at the mercy of the whims of the mad scientist. She does not have the control condition required for rational responsibility. And I love the word responsibility in that because that requires, if to be responsible is the ability to not be irresponsible or irrational. In other words, she does not meet the control condition if something or someone else has complete control of her condition. Yeah, by definition, right? That is to say, if something non-rational or someone else who is untrustworthy controls all of her reason, then there is reason to doubt her reasoning. If someone or someone else controls how she reasons, then there is reason to doubt her use of reason. Indeed, she would lack the kind of libertarian agency to actively use her reason. Instead, her succession of thoughts would not be hers at all, but rather those of her controller. If she is not a libertarian free thinker, then something or someone else is ultimately in control over all her thoughts, intuitions, beliefs, evaluations, judgments. She also does not have control over the next words that will form in her mind or come out of her mouth. If all things are exhaustively determined, then she has no active control over her thoughts, which seems to be antithetical to the teachings of both Jesus and Paul. St. Paul, by the way. What is more, or rather much less, she is nothing but a passive cog. And as epistemologist John DePoe has indicated, quote, ultimately on determinism, the human agent is downgraded from being a person with active powers of rationality to passive cog that is at the mercy of causes beyond one's control. So it's dehumanizing, isn't it? Not only does the passive cogness seem to oppose the teaching of Scripture, it also stands opposed to our direct experience. Speaking of our direct experience of the libertarian freedom to actively think and take thoughts captive, as the Apostle Paul would have said, right? J.P. Moreland observes the following, quote, most of us are quite aware of the different what it is like, the different phenomenological texture in having a passive thought. For example, when someone is talking to me, and an active thought, one in which I exercise my active power and choose to attend. This difference is self-evident to introspective awareness. And such awareness provide non-doxastic internalist grounds for the properly basicality of one's beliefs, that one has and can exercise active power. On this basis, I think the active power is epistemically, conceptually, and ontologically foundational and essential for there to be such things as knowledge of, a concept of, and the existence of libertarian acts. It is, on the basis of this account and knowledge, a relevant moral feature that we have, the concept of moral responsibility. Sure, a passive cog might possess passive awareness. So that's really interesting too. Phenomenologically, without any defeaters for that, there could possibly be reasons, a really good argument to say, but I can tell the difference. The burden of proof's on you to be able to account for the phenomenological difference of having a passive thought versus me an active thought. Interesting argument. One would not possess the ability or power to become more careful while thinking things through. Everything would just be the phenomenological experience of what it's like of having passive thoughts, which we do know passive awareness. One's level of so-called carefulness is also causally determined by the nefarious neurosurgeon. If determinism is true, then one passively experiences sensations of deliberation about what one ought to believe. And keep that in mind too. I ought to. And we think about that. Ought I to believe determinism's true? I can only say that if I have the ability to not think it's true. That's what an ought means. That's why Kant says every ought implies a can. Or can't. Get it? Wonk, wonk. Wonk, 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 wonk. The fact of the matter is that every other belief option besides what God, nature, and mad scientists causally determined the person to believe was closed off and locked away from the person's access. It might have been subjectively seemed as if the person experiencing the sensation of deliberation could have accessed these options, but objectively speaking, it was an illusion, also causally determined by something else. And that's what you get in Daniel Dennett. The ability to actively choose to be more careful while thinking things through seems to be something worth wanting. With this in mind, if one is still hanging on to determinism, another question arises. How can she, not the mad scientist, rationally affirm her current beliefs as good, bad, right? Here's the normative. Better, the best, worst, the worst, true, false, probably true or probably false, without begging the question. This seems to be an impossible task. Epistemologist Jim Slagle makes the point, quote, according to determinism, however, the only methods by which we could examine such a process are the products of these processes themselves. Yeah. To appeal to the reliability of these processes and arguing for the reliability is invalid. By the way, I actually use a similar argument with the reliabilism in epistemology, that's sufficient or necessary for account. In my last paper, actually, and I pull from other epistemologists too to show that the variety of externalism known as reliabilism is neither a sufficient nor necessary condition to give an account of knowledge. So I actually pulled from something very similar. Is we have no access into, well, a clever reliable say you have access, but it's not the justification itself. And then I take that to then, okay, maybe at first order knowledge I might grant you that, but how do I have the meta-theoretical validation of reliabilism itself if I'm going to have a problem there without, what does reliability look like? Is it necessary, sufficient? If it's not, then I have no way of even confirming through simply reliable processes of confirming without actually begging the question at the meta-theoretical valid second order kind of meta-theoretical validation. So I actually was able to solve that problem. What if it's not reliable? Yeah, but if it is, then that's all that matters. Okay, but that doesn't... Do you see what the problem is? Okay. No matter how she responds, the response is not from her, a source, but ultimately determined by and made up by the mad scientist. That is to say, unless she has libertarian freedom, the response will not be from her. And maybe this gives more, again, external causes never seem to be able to be like necessary sufficient condition to hold knowledge. I'm going into like epistemological theories. And it lends more credence to internalism. So there's possibly really good arguments for refuting externalism and leaning more towards something like internalism. If we replace the mad scientist with physics and chemistry, God, or anything else, then we have the exact same rationality problems, but for different reasons. As epistemologist Kelly Fitzsimmons Burton aptly notes, quote, proper function of our cognitive faculties must first rule out the deterministic influence of outsiders such as Alpha Centaurian cognitive scientists, Cartesian evil demons, and also internal influences such as brain lesions or even influence of mind-altering substance. Man, wow! Look at this. Whoa. Wait, what? All right. All these influences may cause one's faculties to fail function properly. We may add, quote, a deity of deception to the list. Jim Slagle writes, quote, the claim, recall, that is that there must be an explanation for a belief. It must be a good explanation, and it must be my explanation. But if the determining factors are extrinsic to the individual, not to the belief, then it is difficult to see how it could be my explanation as opposed... Great argument against externalism, actually. As opposed to just an explanation. In order for it to be my explanation, I have to accept it. If my acceptance is also determined by external forces, which could be God, then in what sense is it my explanation? In fact, how could the resulting state be called a belief at all? Belief seems to involve both reception of information and at some level assent to or approval of. After all, we often receive information that we do not subsequently believe. So clearly, mere reception of information is insufficient definition of belief. Dissent or approval in turn seems to be intrinsically involved in the conception of self-organization. I may not have to originate the explanation of belief, but I do have to make whatever explanation there is my explanation for believing it. This would suggest that determinism is incompatible with belief, and so belief in determinism, including theistic determinism, is self-defeating. All right, how are we doing? Let's look. See if you guys have any super chats, questions. On what we're going over thus far. I'll probably wrap up in a few minutes because I gotta finish the rest of the grades. Grading. I took, that's funny, yeah. My godson was like, look how many tabs you have. I'm like, Do multiple tabs slow down your computer, right? Out of sight, out of mind. I have ADD, so if I don't have those up, even if I save them in favorites, I forget about. They're like things that I regularly go to or want to. I'm working on something, so I keep them up and I go through rather than having to. Otherwise, it's not ideal. Maybe I'll come up with a better system, but that's why. And I actually closed 10 of those tabs last night. I can't really do given my schedule. I need people to work around my schedule. I don't want to work around other people's schedules. Fact of the matter is, I've got the morning prayers, and then people after morning prayers want to do the Patristic Faith discussion Q&A. After, at noon is when, I got to do the rest of the work for the rest of the day. So I can't really fit in. That's why. All right. Another thing came up. Oh, I got stressed. That was interesting. I was having a conversation with my wife about this. There is a theology professor, liberal theology professor, and we're talking about something else, and he slipped something in that I didn't address because I wasn't paying attention. I was focused on the original point, and it wasn't until I walked away later that I was like, wait a minute. Oh, we now know that Matthew didn't write the Gospel of Matthew. Now, if I was back at that point in time paying attention, I would have asked. Now, notice his position was not, we don't know. We now know that he didn't. How would you prove that universal negative? Furthermore, even if you had a more kind of modest position on we don't know, I'd like to ask, how do you know that we don't know that Matthew wrote? And please don't cite as evidence secular biased higher textual critics who are constantly changing the positions and getting everything wrong. And this got into the nature of kind of evidence. I saw a clip where Jordan Peterson was saying, well, there's some link between the serpent and the devil, but it might not be an identical entity. But since it's an archetypical representation, that's how we know that there's a connection, bucko. And I'm like, I've heard that before for those outside the faith, that they don't believe that the serpent is the devil, even though Scripture says the devil, that serpent, right? He refers to, and I can't remember the passage exactly, but also we have the tradition of the church. And so it's the higher textual, we can't use the tradition of the church, right? Because that's biased. And I thought, what a stupid. So and they treat it, well, it just has to be an artifact, like any other secular text, and that's how they approach it. But I'm like, you're not even being honest about that. Why? Whether it's Tacitus, Homer, and these things, one of the things they have no problem accepting as evidence is the people and culture in which we're both the inheritors of those texts and traditions and poems, but immersed out of that, they are fine using that as historical evidence that there was a real person named Tacitus or there was such and such. But for some reason, that's not allowed in Orthodox. I'm like, so, and Christianity. Oh, you can't use because it's biased. Well, what does that even mean? This came up a long time ago at Russ Mannion's dialogue. There was a man named Brady, and he was arguing, making a case for the resurrection, and there were atheists there. And he's citing the 500 witnesses and the apostles, all of who went to their death for this belief that they claim to actually have seen. And atheist objects, well, that's all biased. We need somebody who's not a Christian to testify. And Brady had pointed out, that's ridiculous. That doesn't even make any sense. Anybody that witnessed the miracle of the resurrection is going to believe in the resurrection because it's a miraculous event. It's a life-changing event. It's not a mundane historical fact. And furthermore, it's just a category error. It's like saying, oh, come on. We cannot obviously believe anything that Dedekind's saying here. He's about mathematical conclusions because he's obviously biased. He's a mathematician. We need a non-mathematician who doesn't believe in numbers and mathematical proofs to confirm that it's a mathematical proof. I mean, what a stupid idea. This is what the secular higher textual critic said. We need a non-Christian, anti-Christian who's removed from the group that is actually would be the evidence. That's exactly the evidence you're looking for. To confirm how are these texts formed? What did the people believe? No, we can't have that, right? We have to have non-evidence. The thing that would be categorically not evidence constitute as evidence for it. Just the same way, we need to have a non-mathematician who doesn't believe, who's a skeptic, who doesn't believe in numbers and mathematical proofs, be evidence for mathematical proofs. And what a contradiction. How silly is this? What the real issue is what Chase brings up. How do I deal with having a long mustache? Oh, it's hard. Okay, you got to trim this part here. That gets down. Also, for beards, I do this. When I eat, for some reason, it's like gravity. It's like a gravitational pull into the black hole of my beard. So I have to do this when I pull this. But the mustache, the only way to is you got to just kind of keep this trimmed, the bottom part there. And even that's not a perfect. But that gets back to our question about evidence and stuff like that. And I'm just like, the best sort of evidence in which none of those people have any problem with anything else, looking to the life, the ethos, the tradition, the history of the people in which those texts were formed, the things that they believe, accepting that actually informs them on, whether this is, good evidence that this is true, this person exists. They allow, and so it's all for thee, not for me. I'm fine at this. It's sort of like a species of special pleading, right? Well, I allow it here, but not for you. It just shows they're the actual kind of bias that... And my wife brought up a good point, too. That's like saying... Let's say there's something you want to know about, what I do in life. And somebody offers my wife's testimony as evidence for that. And you're like, well, that's bias. She's your wife. It's like, that doesn't even make sense. That literally is the category of evidence that you would think that would count as good evidence, is the one who's in that actual community or marriage or something like that. And you're excluding it. Why? Because I don't actually want to believe that these things are true. Isn't that interesting? We now know. Yes, that's the other thing. We now know fallacy. All right. Any other questions? Yeah, I will go over my latest paper at some point. It's a good... That's a good suggestion. I'd thought about it. I just haven't. Supposedly it's the best one I've written. It says here in academia, 2 people visited my profile. It must be one of you guys. On the... Any questions? Or let's see if we have any other super chats. I think we do. 1 second. Rongming Shen, is that? I like oatmeal. Yeah. Preach, brother. Thank you so much for that. I do appreciate that. Okay. It is 12:30 Mountain Standard Time. If there are no other questions, you can go over and raid Jim Bob, say hello. We could have actually done this. This is what we forgot. Could have done this today. Habemus Papa. We're gonna get Skittles rainbow smoke come out of the... This is CNBC. 37,000. How boring. You just gotta sit there for... There's this. That's going on. It's Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, dude. Hear it? That's creepy. What time do they close if nothing they have to re-meet? It's obviously in the evening. This guy's got to put up his Zionist flags. I don't know. What if the birds start like falling out of the sky? There it is, the new Pope. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a Pope. Papa Seagull. Yeah, there you go. Amazing news coming out of the Vatican right now, ladies and gentlemen. We do have a Pope. It's now a bird. It's a seagull. This is amazing history. We're coming live from the Vatican right now. Samson the Seagull is now, and what name is he going to take? He is going to take, what? Malachi. That's the set of a contest. There goes Malachi right now. He is now fulfilling prophecy as we speak right now. We are now in the end times. We have a seagull pope named Pope Malachi. Peter, or is it Peter the Seagull? I can't remember. Wow. What amazing times we're living in. We have uploaded through biotechnology and AI. We have now taken all of Pope Francis's thoughts and mind and uploaded it into a seagull. I mean, this is really, I mean, whoever thought, you know, here's something that you know will bring world peace, a seagull that everybody can relate to, right? He is the people's pope, is a seagull. There we go. So we covered that. We covered the Vatican and who the new pope is going to be. and who has been announced. It is a Skittles Seagull Pope named Malachi. I like Mordecai better. Mordecai. Such an ominous name. Oh my God. You Mordecai the Seagull's back. All right. With that, if you guys don't have any other questions, we read all the super chats. So I'm just going to shout out and thank you to all of you supported us today. Dave the Philippian, Philly the Wolf, Mango, and Rong Ming Sheng. Rong Ming Sheng? Is that how I pronounce it? My pronunciation's correct? All right, God bless you guys. Thank you. Thank you for your prayers and your support. Until next time, God bless all of you and keep you and give you good strength. Amen. Bye-bye.